समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Although the Diwali phone call from President Trump to Prime Minister Modi created an impression of a Diwali thaw in the frost between India and America, it is now confirmed that Prime Minister Modi will not be attending the ASEAN summit. Decoding that further, it means that all the chatter about a possible meeting between Trump and Modi is, at least for now, not something that will translate into reality. This has led to speculation that the optimism of an imminent trade deal being in its final stages is perhaps still at this point misplaced. In the midst of the confirmation that Modi will not be attending the ASEAN summit and therefore will not be meeting with President Trump, come Trump's sanctions on Russian oil. Two major Russian firms have been sanctioned, and this, of course, will, at least for the moment, have a direct impact on India, unless, of course, Trump's claims are true and India has privately agreed to some timeline for the tapering out of purchase of oil from Russia. The MEA, for its part, has only said that consumer interests of Indian citizens will be prioritized. In a moment from now, we'll be talking to veteran diplomat and India's former ambassador to the United States of America, Ambassador Arun Singh. I'm Barkha. You're with the Mojo story. On the program today, a confirmation now available that Prime Minister Modi will not be attending the ASEAN summit in Malaysia. This summit has attracted a lot of attention because of the possibility that Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi may have met on its sidelines. The possibility earned some momentum after a Diwali phone call between the two leaders and some sort of civility returning and friendliness even in the language of discourse between the two leaders. But with the confirmation that Prime Minister Modi will not be attending this particular meeting, it also means that perhaps the optimism of an imminent trade deal in its final stages may have been misplaced. All of this comes as Trump, who has now slapped 155% tariff on China, but is also looking to meet with President Xi Jinping, has now turned on Russia. Two major Russian oil firms have been sanctioned. This will, of course, have an impact on India. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has repeated his claim that he has received an assurance from Prime Minister Modi and the Modi government on the tapering out of oil purchases from Russia. Tapering out is my phrase, not Trump's. Trump's shorthand is to say by the end of the year, India will almost not be buying oil from Russia or will hardly be buying oil from Russia or words to that effect. Where does all of this leave the Indo-US relationship? Let's bring up our newsmaker today. Ambassador Arun Singh is with us. As I mentioned, veteran diplomat, former ambassador to the US. Welcome to the program, sir. I want to start by playing out Trump's latest. This is how he describes the assurance that he claims to have received from India. I should say there is no official corroboration of this exact claim, but this claim comes in the midst of sanctions on Russian oil. Take a look.
Talking to him about it. I think it's a little bit of a different talk. India, as you know, has told me they are stop. You know, it's a process. You can't just stop it. But by the end of the year, they'll be down to almost nothing. That's a big thing. That was almost 40% of the oil. India, they've been great. Spoke to Prime Minister Modi yesterday. They've been absolutely great. China's a little bit different. You know, they're a little bit different relationship they have with Russia. It was never good, but because of Biden and Obama, they got forced together. They should never have been.
So we do now know, Ambassador, that we have sanctions from Trump on two major Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, and the numbers are on your screen. What is your first reaction to these sanctions and also to the claim that India has said that by the end of the year, there will be a kind of next to nothing situation in terms of purchase of Russian oil?
So, Barkha, I don't know what India may have said to Donald Trump, but going by past history, it is very unlikely that India would have made a commitment of that nature. But that having been said, now because of the latest action that the US has taken, sanctioning two major Russian oil companies, particularly Rosneft, and as the data you put up shows, a significant part of our Russian oil imports come through Rosneft. So, because of that, we will end up importing much less of Russian oil by the end of the year. Because on account of the sanctions that have been put, US will not allow dollar payments for Russian oil. So there will be no way for India going ahead after November 21 to pay Russia for any oil that it gets from Russia. You can't use dollar. The Europeans won't allow the use of euros. In the past, when we were buying from Iran and there were sanctions on Iran, we had used the UAE dirhams to make some payment which the US had authorized at that time. And when even that was not possible, then a rupee account had been set up in India. Now, and even that rupee account could not be used significantly because Iran was not buying goods from India. So there was huge accumulation of reserves. So you will have no financial mechanism available to buy the Russian oil. And as a result of that, I think the purchases from Russia will, on their own account, come down by the end of the year, not because of any particular commitments
So,
that India may have made to the United States.
so I don't know if I'm being a conspiracy theorist here or I might be accused of having a devious mind. But to my mind, this could end up being a win-win for the India-US relations without India having to make a big statement that may appear, as a surrender of our strategic autonomy. Trump has sanctioned Russia. That imposes a restriction on our purchase of Russian oil. That automatically, as you said, leads to a vast reduction in the mechanism to purchase this oil. It thereby also gives Trump what he wants in terms of his complaint about India buying Russian oil. So is this the face saver that all sides need? I mean, Putin won't be happy, but is this the face saver that Trump and, frankly, the government here needs without it looking like we gave up any of our own autonomy in decision making?
So, to that extent, what you're saying is true. But that having been said, Trump has also imposed so far 25% tariffs, additional 25% tariffs, citing India's earlier purchases of oil from Russia. Now, you could argue that India is facing a double whammy because right now, with the new sanctions coming in, it will be very difficult for us after November 21 to buy Russian oil. And therefore, the energy prices at which the Indian importers were getting the oil is bound to go up because they've been picking up in the spot market and from elsewhere. So that will go up. There'll be a higher drain of foreign exchange reserves from India's point of view. And secondly, the 25% additional tariffs that Trump had placed, they remain in place, for which from India's point of view, there was no justification. Because India was buying less oil from Russia than China was buying. India was importing less from Russia than Europe was buying from Russia. And US was buying almost $750 million worth of uranium from Russia. None of that was sanctioned. So there is this additional sanction. So I would say that from India's point of view, US would have made a significant step accommodating India's concerns if they remove this additional 25% tariff.
Well, that was going to be my question. If India has effectively been, or India's private companies have been effectively prohibited because of these sanctions from purchasing Russian oil, because as you mentioned, the financial mechanism to purchase this oil now doesn't exist because of these sanctions, then does the extra 25% penalty, the penalty that was being imposed on India purportedly for purchasing this Russian oil, does it, would you expect that to go?
But we have to see how Donald Trump plays it. Because, to my mind, that additional 25% that he had placed on India, the Russian oil was used as an excuse on two accounts. One, of course, saying that India is buying Russian oil. Second, if you saw in the filing that the US government administration had done before the Supreme Court, they had claimed that they were using tariffs for achieving foreign policy objectives. Because there is a challenge in the US court system that Donald Trump does not have the authority to impose tariffs because that lies with US Congress. And so they're making a claim that they're using tariffs for foreign policy purposes where the president has a mandate. And in the Supreme Court filing, the administration has made a specific reference to the tariffs on India, and that they have used that to try and resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So that's one. So I think India is being penalized, I would say, twice. Your energy costs will go up, the 25% extra tariffs remain, but the question would be, what peg does Donald Trump use to remove those additional 25% tariffs? It can be that after November 21, when the imports of Russian oil come down, then the administration has a peg to remove those 25% tariff. But then what happens to the argument that they have been using before the Supreme Court? Because the Russia-Ukraine conflict is nowhere near resolution. So I don't know how the administration will deal with that. But yes, certainly it's something that is not justified. And if the US is penalizing India twice over, that's an assessment that Indian policymakers and analysts have to keep in mind.
Let me pick up a question from our audience stream. Prasad says, Barkha, the sanctions will push global oil prices up because Russian price will be out of the world markets, creating a shortage of about 6 to 7% globally. This will be inflationary to the whole world. This also reminds me of what former American envoy Eric Garcetti had actually said publicly, that the Americans had actually nudged India into purchasing Russian oil because it would stabilize oil prices, in the world markets. There is going to be a consequence to this unilateralism. In the short term, sure, it may ease up some tensions between India and America de facto, but it is not going to be without consequences, including to India, because right now, what is this Russian oil going to be substituted with? It's going to be substituted with a higher priced oil from somewhere, maybe America.
No, that's absolutely true. And US, of course, would want other countries to buy more from the US, but we have to see what is the price at which it is available, what are the transportation costs that come into play. Unless US persuades some of its other partners, like Saudi Arabia, to increase the oil availability in the market. So they may try and do something like that, because if there is higher energy price, higher oil price resulting from the sanctions that US put in place, it will also impact the American consumer. And there is inflation happening in the US, and there is dissatisfaction among the American consumer because of higher prices there. So that's again something that the Trump administration will need to address. So I think it's a complicated situation, and we have to see how different players react to this evolving scenario.
Ambassador, yesterday, after the Diwali details were out of the phone call between Trump and Prime Minister Modi, some analysts believe that the trade deal's closure was imminent and that there could be possibly a meeting between the two principals along the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. Today, we have the confirmation from the Malaysians that Prime Minister Modi will not be in attendance. FM Jaishankar will be representing India instead. Prime Minister Modi may dip in virtually and so on. What do you make of the fact that this meeting, much anticipated, is not going to happen? It tells you that there's still homework being done in the back channels, doesn't it?
So, Barkha, I think the tone of the conversation between the two governments and between the two leaders has certainly changed for the positive over the past month or so. After Prime Minister's visit to Tianjin and the photos of his with President Putin, President Xi, there was a little bit of a blowback in the US. And President Trump was being criticized about whether he was losing India as a result of the tariffs they had put in place, other measures they were taking. So after that, gradually he started changing his tone. He he put out in the social media several positive posts related to India. Spoke to the Prime Minister on his birthday. Then, of course, in the context of Diwali. And some of the negative comments that his advisors, like Pete Navarro, Scott Bessent, had been making, calling India a laundromat, all that has vanished from the discourse.
How do you explain that? What's happened? What has changed?
I think they realized that with whatever they were doing, there was a negative blowback in India. At the popular level, also in India, the US was seen as an unreliable and coercive partner. There was potentially a longer-term negative impact on the US-India relationship, which didn't work for them. So they've changed that. But the fact is that they haven't removed the tariffs as yet. Both sets of tariffs on trade and Russia purchases remain in place so far. At the same time, the trade negotiations have resumed. and there have been ministerial level discussions. Recently, according to reports, our Commerce Secretary had gone to the US, discussions had continued. But if you saw the statements that were coming out at the official level from both sides, were that they were expecting the trade agreement to be finalized in a couple of months, not that it was imminent.
Yeah.
So if there is no trade agreement that
Well,
was imminent, then it didn't make sense for the Prime Minister to work for a meeting with President Trump, because the trade agreement is not ready. You have the meeting, and the way President Trump operates, you don't know what he will say during and after the meeting. And
That's
it
right.
can become very awkward unless you are sure that what will be the outcome from that meeting on trade, issues related to Russian oil and other things. Plus, there are elections in Bihar going to be held on November 6th and November 11th. They are very important elections. So one can make the argument that at this stage, unless there was something very, very positive likely to emerge from a meeting, didn't make sense for the Prime Minister to be out of India at this stage. So I think that's a valid argument.
Well, domestic politics will govern the choices and responses of both leaders. The opposition in India has been targeting the Prime Minister continuously over the engagement with Trump, over the tall claims that Trump seems to make repeatedly. One of the claims that he made, even in the sort of improved post-Diwali environment, Ambassador Arun Singh, was a claim of, I told Prime Minister, let there be no war with Pakistan. And if you noticed, very subtle messaging there on Pakistan from Prime Minister, who in his comments spoke about terrorism. And it was seen to be like, you said, let there be no war. And here we are saying, first stop the terrorism. Do you believe that the concerns we have about what is considered a Trump tilt to Pakistan, what's happened to all of that? That hasn't gone out of the window. A few days ago at the Gaza Peace Pact signing, Trump called Asim Munir his favorite field marshal.
So I wouldn't call it a tilt as such. It's just that they have also tried to normalize their relations with Pakistan. And you had seen signs of that even in the first Trump administration, because he had started the first term by first in July 2017 in a major speech that he gave on South Asia policy. He criticized Pakistan very heavily, asked India to do more in Afghanistan. And then on 1st January 2018, he had tweeted that Pakistan has been hoodwinking us, stop all aid to Pakistan. But later, when they felt that they needed support from Pakistan to get an agreement with the Taliban, which was eventually done by February 2020, they reached out to Pakistan. They invited Imran Khan, the then Pakistan Prime Minister, to the White House. He was accompanied to that meeting by the then Army Chief of Pakistan and then the Director General of Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence. So that outreach had been done. So I think in the second term, as one can see, the Pakistanis have also made a very determined effort to reach out to President Trump, to reach out to the family, to reach out to the Trump organization. They've invested in the World Liberty Financial, which is the cryptocurrency firm of the Trump organization. And so they've done that kind of outreach. Now, from the US perspective, if Pakistan is not at the moment doing something specific that is adversarial to US interest or to Donald Trump's political calculations, they would want to have a relationship with Pakistan. And historically, they've said that they want a relationship with Pakistan because it's a country with large number of nuclear weapons. It's a country whose cooperation they need for counterterrorism purposes. So from their own perspective, they'll certainly reach out to Pakistan. But that doesn't mean that there is a tilt towards Pakistan. Their relationship with Pakistan will be determined how they see that interest. Their relationship with India will be determined how the values they see in the relationship with India in terms of the economic partnership, trade and investment partnership, technology partnership, and in dealing with the challenge from China in the broader Indo-Pacific region. So I think perhaps in India there has been a reaction because in the first part of the first Trump administration, there was a negative approach to Pakistan, which people are not seeing now. But then if we, basically make the assessment that any country will define its relationship with other country based on perception of its own interests, then, we shouldn't call it a tilt towards Pakistan. It's just that they are trying to see what value they can extract from the Pakistan relationship. And from all reports, Pakistan is offering them investments in critical minerals in Balochistan, access to a port in Balochistan. Now, whether all that is really viable or not, remains to be seen in the future.
In the midst of all this, India's had a dramatic and official reset with the Taliban. And the Taliban foreign minister's visit to India coincided with Pakistan bombing targets inside Kabul. That border battle continued for a few days till Qatar was able to mediate some sort of settlement. Tragically, cricketers were killed on the ground in that bombing, and the Afghan team then pulled out of a tri-series cricket match. Those are some of the images we're seeing on the screen. This reset has been widely debated. It is also seen to be some sort of messaging, not just to Pakistan, but also to Trump. Trump has got obsessed with the idea of retaining or reclaiming the Bagram base, and Taliban has said no. India has backed that. India has stood with Taliban, Russia, China, even Pakistan on that issue. How do you see the sort of debate over Bagram and the reset with the Taliban?
So, first, there are issues between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and between Pashtuns in Afghanistan and Pakistan that have got nothing to do with India. You'll recall that way back in 1947, when Pakistan had to join the United Nations, it had to be voted into the UN as a new country, because India automatically was part of the United Nations, being among the founding members in 1945. And at that time, only one country had voted against Pakistan's entry to the UN, and that was Afghanistan, because Afghanistan doesn't recognize the Durand Line, which was imposed by the British. So there are issues between Afghanistan and Pakistan that are intrinsic to their relationship. So given all that, and governments in Afghanistan historically have attempted to maintain good relations with India, and we had certain concerns earlier related to the Taliban, their dependence on Pakistan. There was sense that they had attacked Indian interests in Afghanistan, including in 2008, when two of our officials at the embassy had been killed. So those concerns were there. And then, if you remember, in the first Taliban administration, when they came in 1996, India had evacuated its embassy. And we were able to go back only in 2001 after the Taliban had left. But I think since then, with all the messaging that had been coming from the Taliban, it was clear that they wanted to have a good working relationship with India. And from all the reports that one sees, they have said they valued the assistance that India had provided in Afghanistan, starting from 2001, and that the people in Afghanistan had benefited from and supported that assistance, and they wanted that assistance to continue. So as a result of that, they have tried to maintain the relationship with India. Earlier, they had a meeting with the Indian Foreign Secretary, if I remember, in UAE. Then, of course, a phone call with our foreign minister, now the visit of the Afghan foreign minister. So I think keeping in mind their own trade, economic interests in terms of the projects that they need, they want to maintain a good relationship with India. And certainly it is in India's interest to have a good working relationship with the Taliban. And it's because of that India has now upgraded its technical mission in Kabul to the level of an embassy.
Finally, to return to the sort of Indo-US equation, even if it is repairing, work in progress, repairing, do you believe that it could ever be the same? And it's quite interesting. Sort of Mumbai-born Indian-American Ashley Tellis, before he found himself arrested on charges of taking classified documents home, had made the argument that India had to pick a side. He accused India in one of his columns of having quote-unquote great power delusions. He said India's multipolarities didn't work in an essentially bipolar world. Today, he's been effectively accused of not just having 1,000 pages of top secret documents at his home, but having dinners with Chinese officials that can't be fully explained, according to the FBI. Now, I bring this up because I want to ask whether you believe that what was sometimes called India leaning into America, whether India would ever lean in towards America or lean towards America in the same way, given what's happened. Tellis was arguing before he found himself in the midst of this scandal that India had to pick a side. And Indians have been arguing, Indian thinkers, Indian public intellectuals, Indian diplomats like yourselves have been reassessing whether the original mistake was that we had leaned too much towards the US. Where do you see the equation going from here? Is it Trump-proof? Will it, adapt to the Trump years and bounce back to something else, or has the damage been done?
So one, of course, I don't think we had leaned too much towards the US. The relationship with the US was being built keeping in mind our own comprehensive national interest. Now, the US, as you know, Barkha, is our largest trading partner, is the largest source of foreign direct investment in India, is the largest destination for Indian foreign investment outside India. At 5.4 million, the largest single country presence of Indian origin diaspora. And it's still the largest consumer market in the world. And if you look at the three major global players, Russia, China, and the US, China is adversarial. Russia has strengths in defense and energy, but not in the civilian economy. So, if you are looking at meeting India's aspirations, talking of Viksit Bharat, of growing the economy, US remains an important and necessary partner. So I understand that the relationship was being built keeping this dimension in mind across governments. It was, a major effort done during government of Prime Minister Vajpayee, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and now, of course, during Prime Minister Modi's tenure. Similarly, in the US, across Republican and Democratic presidents since 2000, an effort was being made to consolidate the India relationship because they saw value in the strength of the bilateral partnership and also the common challenge that both had related to China. So that was there. Even while this was happening, the message from India was clear that even as we build this, India would strive to maintain the autonomy of its decision making. Because if you pick a side and you are the weaker player in that partnership, then you will be coerced to do more and more in terms of what is the interest of that more of the stronger partner rather than what is your interest. And that is not going to work. And also, I used to say very often when I was ambassador that if any time there's a perception in India that India is taking interest based on what US is telling India rather than what is in India's interest, there'll be huge blowback in India.
Absolutely.
People become negative towards the India-US relationship. So that was certainly not the direction to go. So I think with the kind of steps that Trump has taken, two trends will become stronger in India. One, people will say that certainly you should do more with the US, that is in our interest, but diversify more, hedge more. Make sure that US doesn't have the capacity to coerce India and India can maintain the autonomy of its decision making. Second, even as you buy more and more from the US in defense equipment, which, in many areas, what they are able to supply to us is not available elsewhere, make sure that India is not security dependent on the US. So that at a moment of crisis, you don't need security support from the United States. Because today, for example, it can be argued that Japan, Korea, and the European Union have caved into the US on its trade demands because they need US for their own security. If that were not the case, they would not have caved in the same way. So make sure that at a moment of crisis, you are in a position to take care of your own security interests in terms of your own strength. So with this kind of caveat, I do believe that the effort to consolidate the relationship with the US should certainly continue because that is, again, in India's longer term interest.
All right, Ambassador Arun Singh, we'll leave it there. In any case, as you pointed out, one of the big stated stumbling blocks, whether or not it's being used as an excuse by Trump or not, was the purchase of Russian oil. With the sanctions on two major Russian firms, India effectively can't purchase that oil. It'd be very interesting to see whether Trump still imposes or holds on to that 25% so-called penalty. Thank you so much, sir. Always a pleasure. See you again soon. Bye-bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.